Hello and welcome to the Tuesday Total Soccer Show. I am Darryl Grove and I'm back in Richmond and I'm joined by Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hey buddy, how you doing?
Pretty good. It's good to be back here with you. No more remote recording.
I know, it's nice. No more worries about you going down or coming back on 95, which I assume was not that much fun. That highway is never that fun.
No, there were big storms as well. So we had to delay a couple of times, hence my late arrival.
There we are.
Speaking of leaving, we're going to open the show. We've got listener questions today, but we're also going to talk about the CFU, Caribbean or Caribbean?
I think you can do either one.
Okay.
There's lots of different ways to
Caribbean Football Union suggestion/threat that they may leave CONCACAF. This is big news if it happens.
If it happens, yeah. Right now, from what I understand, it's essentially the president of the CFU, Gordon Derrick is his name. It's something he wants to do, so it was approved to be explored by the CFU executive committee. Essentially, they had a meeting in Miami. They said, sure, you have the green light to investigate what this might take, and that's, I think, where they are now. So
for those who are who don't follow this so much, right? Obviously, CONCACAF is where US, Mexico, Canada all qualify from. There are 41 nations in CONCACAF.
There are other nations aside from USA, Mexico, Canada. Yeah.
Well, those are the most likely people to be listening, right? There are 41 nations in CONCACAF. 31 of those nations are from the CFU.
Right.
Many, many islands, the CFU, 31 nations.
So 31 nations, but only 25 officially, right? Isn't it 25 are FIFA members?
Yes.
And then
six are non-FIFA affiliated. But there are 31 member nations. So they could play in, I think, the Gold Cup, something like that. Yeah.
But it only gets confusing because you've got 25, but then you've got 41 nations in CONCACAF or however many it is. The numbers get a little bit confusing.
Right, but let's put it this way. If the CFU split from CONCACAF, there would be only 10 CONCACAF nations left behind. This would change the sort of face of football in North America and Central America because there would no longer be Caribbean teams involved.
Right.
Okay, so if this happened, who would we be losing?
So, 31 teams, obviously.
Yeah, but the big ones we'd be losing.
The biggest ones would be Jamaica, Haiti, and Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah,
would be the ones
not necessarily in that order, but yes.
No, but in terms of kind of consistent teams that consistently are at the Gold Cup, make it to the Hex, give the United States problems in qualifying, if we're talking about from an American perspective.
And threaten to get to the World Cup like Jamaica and Trinidad have done in the past.
They have indeed. I believe 1998 was the last time Trinidad was there, but it might... No, I think they made it sooner.
Because England played them. John Terry overhead kick off the line. So why do the Caribbean nations want to leave CONCACAF? Because in my head, it makes more sense to be attached to other nations and form a bigger bloc.
I think the biggest thing, because we've talked about this before, is that with a lot of these countries, the way World Cup qualifying works is that they're eliminated from World Cup qualification 2.5 years before the tournament even begins, just because that's the way, you've got to get to the next level to get to the Hex to get to the World Cup.
So the only Caribbean nation in the Hex, I believe, Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. Yeah, Jamaica missed out, exactly. Yeah, Jamaica also, I believe, missed out on the Gold Cup, but I could be wrong. I know Trinidad did. Trinidad not in the Gold Cup. So I think there's this idea that if they form their own union, then they can have maybe greater competition, they can promote greater growth, they'll have more money to directly control that they can then distribute. At least that's the argument that it seems that Derrick is making.
Was that President Gordon Derrick, president of the CFU, was that... I remember that being part of his quote, right? That, we aren't getting the development money we should be getting.
Yeah, I think essentially his argument is that there is a lot of money coming in that hasn't really been distributed correctly. Now, I think you could argue that that is the fault of maybe a number of different people, from Chuck Blazer to Jack Warner, and Jeffrey Webb, who are both represented CFU countries, as I said in today's Goalmouth.
I'd say there's enough blame to go around in CONCACAF and in the CFU.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think his larger point is that you have so many of these countries that make up the bulk of CONCACAF that don't necessarily make it to the Gold Cup, or rarely make it to the Gold Cup. You have rarely make it to the World Cup, and so you have this idea that we're there and we're contributing and we make up numbers, but you guys don't really help us develop and become better nations.
And just to name check,
when it comes to soccer, that is.
Turks and Caicos, the US Virgin Islands.
Even Cuba. Cuba's in there.
Antigua and Barbuda, right? There's a lot of countries. Antigua and Barbuda got kind of far in World Cup qualifying, right? St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A lot of these countries do not really have a good shot at World Cup qualifying.
Right, yeah.
Or at Gold Cup winning, or, doing anything to challenge the bigger nations like, say, Mexico and the United States.
Right, exactly.
All right, so I understand maybe why they would break off. They don't feel like they're getting their fair share, because numerically they make up most of CONCACAF, right?
Yeah. And I also would add that we have the expanded World Cup. You have 48 teams going now.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the way those seeds are going to be, or the numbers that each confederation is going to get, if you're the CFU, it's there's more countries going, but that does not guarantee that another CFU country or two countries get to go.
Yeah.
And so...
it makes it more likely for Jamaica and Trinidad, but it doesn't extend to the rest of those smaller teams. Right?
No, exactly.
So is your idea that maybe if they have their own separate confederation, they could get more World Cup spots, at least guaranteed spots to go to the World Cup?
At least like one guaranteed spot, or maybe like 1.5 or 2 spots, and so then you get more teams that can compete for a longer period of time.
So let's think about how this affects the United States, because obviously that is our main interest. If CFU that separated, CONCACAF suddenly is only 10 teams big, the teams, like, the quality would be across, like, as an average of the team, the quality would be better, right? There are teams in there that aren't so strong, like say Belize. But you still, because you lose so many of the smaller island nations, the quality of those 10 teams, you're talking like Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, Canada, US, it's Costa Rica, Panama, I believe, So it's still a pretty...
Nicaragua, if you didn't say them already.
I'm sure there's one nation that we forgot to say.
El Salvador, I believe, who we left out.
But that's still not super strong if those are the only teams you're playing. I think it opens the door to a merger with CONMEBOL, right?
I think so.
10 from North and Central, 10 from South America. Suddenly you've got a 20-team confederation could happen.
Yeah, and I think that would be where you would be going potentially. So that's one option, is that then... And I think the theory was that with the 48-team World Cup that maybe like CONMEBOL would get 6 places for 10 teams, which doesn't really make that much sense. I mean, it makes sense in terms of the quality in South America.
Like MLS playoff numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly. And same thing for CONCACAF. So then maybe it makes more sense to combine and say like you get 10 spots for those 20 teams, something like that. That's one possibility. The other one that I could see, I don't think happening anytime soon, is that you start to get smaller confederations, that you get a bunch of different confederations, all of whom get like 2 spots.
So you're looking at the CFU breakaway as the beginning of more federations breaking away. What are you thinking?
Look at the AFC, for example, and you've got a ton of teams in the Middle East. You've got Central Asian teams. You've got Far East teams. So you could see that split there. You could see Australia go back to Oceania and have like 1.5 guaranteed spots for Oceania or something like that. You could see Africa break apart into different regions. Same thing, even Europe, like Western,
maybe sub-Saharan and the opposite of sub-Saharan.
Above Saharan? And like North Africa as well. Yeah, and then you could do, like East and West Europe potentially. And I know that sounds crazy, but it does seem like
could have British Isles qualifying.
Yeah,
that'd be the ultimate Brexit, right?
I think that's a terrible idea, but sure.
England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and we have 4 qualifying spots to play for between the 4 of us.
Yeah, sure, perfect. But I think that it does seem like that's like one way you could take it, is that if you have more countries going to the World Cup, and if your stated objective is to get more teams there who either like haven't been there or wouldn't necessarily be there without this expansion, then going smaller and having like 2 spots guaranteed for these 10 teams, and 2 for these 10, and 4 for these 10, and like that makes, I think, a little more sense. Again, I don't know if that would happen, or at least it wouldn't happen right away. But that's another way I could see it going.
It's like we're going back to the regionalization of soccer, right? I'm not sure I like it. It's like rolling back the more sort of global world we've been developing for the last 50 years?
Well, yeah, but I could see it from like from a competition standpoint, that it makes the World Cup maybe an expanded World Cup that people already assume is going to be kind of diluted when it comes to talent. Diluted, not diluted.
Some would argue.
Yeah, either way. It makes it more of like a world event then, because say you split East and West Europe in terms of qualifying, then that means you're not going to have so much like crossover there, so you're not going to have teams playing each other, twice in friendlies and twice in qualification in 1 year or in 2 years or whatever. There becomes less familiarity.
Are you saying the World Cup is more representative of the globe then, because you've definitely got places from all over different spots?
But it also makes it a bigger occasion, because then if you have teams that would otherwise be playing each other all the time in Euro qualifying and in the Euros and in World Cup qualifying, suddenly England maybe isn't going to get to draw Ukraine or Slovenia or whomever, and it becomes a more exciting moment when those two teams do play each other, because otherwise they're not going to see each other that often.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could get too excited for Slovenia, England.
Yeah, maybe that was a bad example. But just say like, I don't know, Russia, France or something like that, where they wouldn't necessarily play each other outside of the World Cup.
All right, so before we start pulling apart the map and separating regions out, we've got to ask, are the CFU serious? Do the Caribbean nations actually want this, or is this maybe just a threat to maybe extract a little more from the other CONCACAF nations? Is it like a treat us better or lose us kind of situation?
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is.
That's the vibe I get, at least because there's no like official press release come out, right? This has been like reported in odd places.
It sounds like he has.
And by odd, I mean the Daily Mail.
Yeah, the Daily Mail and InsideWorldFootball.com. Yes, I think it's basically. Gordon Derrick has been given authorization to assemble a fact-finding team or something.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like it's the very first step, and I think that you could take it as like, oh, they definitely want to split, or I think more likely it's they want to reconfigure CONCACAF qualifying so that it's more beneficial for all of these teams who are otherwise disenfranchised.
Is there a danger that they could call CONCACAF's bluff and CONCACAF as kind of like, all right?
Yeah, I think so. Especially because there's no guarantee of places. And that's, again, why there's the fact-finding, why they're going to have to do the research. Because,
it's fact-finding saying, hey, Infantino, how many spots would we get?
I think so, because if the answer is none or like a half,
or 0.25 or 0.5,
exactly. Like it doesn't, then that doesn't necessarily suit them.
I would say 1.5. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Seems about right.
Mm-hmm. I think so. So I think it's probably more so a statement of intent in terms of we want things to change so that things are a little more fair and things help develop the game, which I think is the smarter way for the CFU to take it. Because I have seen some of it being like, there's like been historical oppression from North America and from the United States and Canada, and it's been, this disenfranchisement and corruption. And that I just think it doesn't resonate as much as it's an expanded World Cup format. We want more teams there. We would like to be incorporated. I think that that's fair. Yeah. And then I can see how that becomes a greater selling point for people around the world to say, like, yeah, they should get more representative at the World Cup.
And especially right now for the CFU, for the nations, it probably comes at a good time to propose this because Trinidad not doing great in the Hex, right? They're doing as badly as the United States, essentially, and Jamaica didn't make it, right? Now it's a more attractive proposition to have your own confederation.
Trinidad fired their most recent coach, hired a new coach who is Trinidadian, I believe.
Yes.
Or Tobagan, I'm not sure. But yes, I mean, they're on their third coach in like 6 months, if not fewer. Not ideal. Sorry, DJ Ringus. I apologize for making you sad.
Speaking of, shall we move on to talk about changes to global football with our first listener question today? It is from Ira Jersey.
Sounds good to me.
All right, Ira emailed to say, over the break, I listened to The Secret Footballer on Audible, as Darryl suggested. You're welcome. Toward the end of the book, The Secret Footballer suggested that he believed there would be a European Super League. I don't believe it will necessarily happen, but let's suppose it does. Right, Tyler? It's a thought experiment coming on the show. I can think of two plausible ways it could be done. In both cases, I would think the Champions League as we know it goes away. Ira proposed, one, an MLS-style single-entity league that rich teams basically buy their way into and stay in. Or two, you basically replace the Champions League with some form of Super League. And Ira wonders, would either of these work, or how would you structure such a league? And I'm going to let you go first, Tyler. This is a big, complicated one.
Shall I talk about Ira's suggestions first, or shall I talk about the thing that I think would work the best?
Well, I think Ira's suggestions, they were more detailed in the email, but too long to read out on the show. Okay. So maybe, but you get the broad strokes of what I was talking about, right? So let's hear your suggestion.
So I don't think the MLS buy-in structure would work.
Okay, let's talk about that first then.
Okay.
Why not? I kind of agree, but why not?
Because I think basically then the biggest one, which you could handle with fit and proper persons and everything like that, is that there's no guarantee of quality. Because if it's just...
There's just guarantee of money,
you have to pay $100 million to get into this league, then any billionaire who wants to have own a team that's in this league can get in there. And then at a certain point you reach that, now there's 30 teams in there. How do we divide it up? How do we break it into? Do we have to have two leagues, but now you've overpaid for one?
And as an example, Leicester City could have been someone who should have qualified for a Super League, but maybe their owners aren't going to put that much money into it. Not that Leicester City owners are poor, but they're not like Man City owner rich, right?
Yeah,
so
obviously.
Then, it's rewarding just quantity of money versus quality of team.
Yeah, and then I think the single entity model also is dependent upon central ownership, salary caps, everybody being equal. And I think that if you have a Super League where everyone has paid an absurd amount of money to buy in to be at in a higher stratosphere, then you can't have equality abound. So
it's actually the single entity, I think, is my interpretation of what Ira suggested. So he may not have said that.
Okay, fair enough.
But the basic idea is that you'd buy into it and then you could never be expelled from it. But also, no other teams can get in just on quality of soccer.
Right.
You got to buy in.
So then I've heard other suggestions, I think Florentino Perez, the president of Real Madrid, he's a big proponent of this. He floated this idea.
Of course he is.
Back in
he wants to call it the Galactico Super League.
Exactly, I'm sure. He floated an idea in 2009, I think, of having like an end of season tournament where it would be like you don't have the Champions League until the very end. I don't know about that one. The one that I think makes the most sense, and it's kind of elaborate, and I've done a bunch of reading, and there's a few different sites that have talked about this.
I'm rubbing my hands, listeners. I love when Taylor puts an elaborate proposal before us.
So it would basically work like this. So you keep the Champions League and Europa League essentially in name only, and that Champions League is its own league, basically.
Okay.
So the way it works is, say, at the end of this season, if you have 20 teams in that league, so you'd have 3 from England, 3 from Spain, 3 from Germany, 2 from Italy, however many, each country, those qualifying teams get lumped into the Champions League, right?
Yep.
Those teams are essentially always in that league. So you'd have, say, the way the table is right now, so you'd have, Chelsea, Arsenal, I forget who's in third, I guess Liverpool now? I forget. Anyway, those 3, they would go, Madrid, Barcelona, they would always be in there. They would always be competing in that league. Unless they finish in the bottom 3, they get relegated back to their league.
So I have basically the same proposal.
Okay.
The European Super League, and just to backtrack, the reason that this is proposed is that the big teams see that the most money is to constantly be playing each other. So the idea is to cut out the smaller teams from the Champions League and just have a European Super League where they can sort of get all the limelight. But I have a similar proposal. So I'm not going to sidetrack you. I'm just going to say that I agree with that. That is kind of not necessarily what I want to happen, but what could happen is you essentially get promoted out of your domestic league and play in a Super League for a season or so.
Yeah. Is that right? And the reason why I've said you keep the Europa League is because then...
Oh, that's out in my proposal.
Okay, but see, here's why. I think you have to keep it, though, because then you have to incentivize not just winning the domestic league, because if you have 3 of the biggest teams now out of the Premier League or La Liga, you don't have Madrid, Barcelona anymore, and then probably Atletico or Sevilla, depending on the season. They're gone. So it becomes exciting because now smaller teams can win.
That's in my proposal here,
But you also want to incentivize winning and reward them. And so what I think you could do is keep the Europa League as your second tier. So say you win, say the year... This season, let's say Madrid, Barcelona, and Sevilla go, right?
Yeah.
So then Atletico win it next year. Yeah. They move into the Europa League because then you can't have another Spanish team drop out.
Yes.
So then basically if Sevilla then wins the Europa League, then they get promoted in. The bottom 3 teams from the Champions League drop down to the Europa League.
We have come up with the exact same proposal.
There we go.
Yeah, because the way I wanted to do it was have teams promoted out of their domestic leagues into the Super League, right? And again, I'm not necessarily in favour of this, but if we're going to do it, this is how it would work.
Yeah.
And then you'd want other teams to be able to be promoted out as well, right? You can't have a closed door system.
Right.
But you can't say win at the end of one season and then necessarily go directly in the next season, especially if you want more than just the English, Spanish, German, French, Italian teams, right? You've got to give other teams a chance. So I saw I didn't call it the Europa League, but I called it essentially like the playoff tournament, which runs concurrently with the next season. So you've got to win your league one season. Next season you still play in your domestic league, you play in this
you have it like
League.
that, I see.
Yeah, then that's the qualifying. So you've got to win that the next season. And then maybe the top 3 or 4 teams from that qualifying tournament go into the Super League the next season.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I like this.
We solved it. And this is way easier than I expected.
And the reason why I think I do think it will happen to some extent. And the reason why...
Arsene Wenger predicted 2019.
Right.
He said that in 2009, I think. In 10 years, I think this will happen.
Yeah, lots of people predict things not realizing that that's not that far away. The biggest thing that I've seen is... with the Premier League TV deal right now, as it is, I believe the Premier League's deal is about £9 billion total for all of their TV rights. That means Real Madrid, from the numbers that I've seen, it took home £81 million for winning La Liga last year. Or for winning the Champions League, right?
TV money.
Yeah. The side finishing bottom in the Premier League will take home about $97 million. Because they have so much money coming in. Right. So at a certain point, those European clubs are going to look at the Premier League model and they're going to want that money because there's going to be a growing chasm in wealth.
And we're going to assume that the TV money for we're going to call it, I guess, the UEFA Super League, which obviously replaces the Champions League altogether. That money will be more than the Premier League money. It has to be, right? Just because it will be a higher standard of competition where... So can I tell you my proposal? So it's a 20-team league that you qualify for. The way I've done it is you just do UEFA coefficients at least to get it rolling, right? So you have 20 teams. So the top 3 UEFA coefficients in order are Spain, Germany, England. 3 teams each. So that's 9 teams. Then Italy and France, the next 2 teams down, get 2 teams each. Then the next 5 teams below that...
13, right?
Below that, you've got Portugal, Russia, Ukraine, and Belgium. They get 1 each, so that's 17. And then the remaining 3, you can't just give it to the next nations down. I think everybody else then has to have a playoff tournament, and maybe like the teams that make the final, they go in, and then the third place playoff winner, they go in as well. So that means that teams from like Netherlands, Czech Republic, Scotland, like any other nation in Europe that can send teams to qualify in this tournament and get to the final 3, they take the last few places.
All right.
So then, because you really want to incentivize all those nations to at least be able to get someone in there.
Yeah.
Over time, I believe this league would just fill up with German, English, Spanish, Italian, French teams.
See,
right?
I think that's the logical thought to have with the current environment of global soccer.
Yeah.
But the idea then is that if you have this European Super League, you're going to have so much money coming in that it gets distributed to the teams. And
so
maybe
if Benfica make it once, suddenly they get loads of money. Suddenly players want to play there, right? They're like, I don't want to play for, let's say Man City don't make it. Yeah. Players will be like, I don't play for Man City in the English Premier League. I want to play in the Super League.
Exactly.
I'm going to join Benfica. Yeah.
And even you could you could even then incentivize it further so that depending on where you finish, you get money sent back to your respective domestic league. So then you're still kind of sending money.
Trickle down economics.
Very trickle down. The other idea I saw, which I thought was interesting, and I forget the website where I found it, was that you basically have the system that we've talked about, but the other wrinkle is that these Super League teams still compete in their domestic cup competition.
Yes, I had that too.
Okay, so then
we haven't talked about this, right?
Not.
I was on 95 North all day, scribbling this on a notepad and looking at my phone. Yeah.
I
wasn't driving.
Because then you still want, if you are Man City or Liverpool, you still want to have that sort of tie to where you're from, and you're still going to be training in your country. You're still going to want to compete more regularly than flying to Ukraine for one game and then flying home. Or if you have 3 away games in a row, you're in a lot of trouble. So so you're still going to want that sort of connection. And then for the smaller clubs, it now becomes an even bigger deal because suddenly Liverpool from the Super League, we drew them in the third round of the whatever Carling, Capital One, Coca-Cola, whatever it is, Cup.
It'll have to be an amalgam of sponsors at that point.
The EFL League Cup, whatever it is. Yeah.
So what about relegation? How many would you relegate out of the Super League?
3.
And distribute back to their respective countries? Me too. And then that makes it exciting, right? And it's a really big deal. If you're relegated from the Super League, you need to then win your domestic league or finish in the top 2 or whatever, and then you need to win the qualifying tournament. It's a long way back.
Makes it harder.
Right?
Yep.
It makes it terrible to get relegated. And I was always just picturing, if a team gets relegated, then there has to be an agreement with the domestic league that you will accept this team back into your top flight, which means maybe one extra team gets relegated, one fewer teams gets promoted. That's tough, but it's kind of we're talking about a very sort of Darwinian system here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be brutal because if you have this massive payroll and suddenly you're going back to the Premier League, or if you are Benfica, who were there for 3 years and suddenly you get relegated, now you've got this huge payroll and you're not having nearly as much money. Now you're in trouble. So then you have to worry about parachute payments and all that good stuff as well.
I would say the one thing I would demand of this league is, one, the schedule's going to have to be kind of spread out a bit. There's going to be a lot of games you want to see, right? This can't all be Saturday afternoon.
Oh, I didn't think about that, yeah.
Yeah, because you're going to watch games. 2, I would need some sort of solar-powered jet to be invented so that we are not destroying the environment by having teams fly all over the globe for, what,
No, I think
18 games
I think it would save you because, I mean, you have that exact same thing with the Champions League right now. You're getting rid of the Champions League. You have fewer teams in it, so you probably have fewer flights.
Interesting. Okay.
There you go.
I like it. All right. I still think this whole league should be sponsored by solar-powered planes.
I'm not sure that's a thing yet, so that could be a problem.
It is a thing. It circumnavigate the globe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commercially?
No.
Okay.
More scientifically. But I think it only carried 1 or 2, basically scientists. But they did it.
I equate that to those old-timey videos of the plane with 30 wings on either side trying to fly and just collapsing. I'm all for solar energy, but let's not maybe experiment with the European Super League, shall we?
It's the non-Wright brothers. It's the Sylvester brothers.
The wrong brothers?
Maybe
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Yes. Maybe it needs more wings.
That's what we're missing.
Let's make it heavier wings. We need heavier wings.
Oh, science. Or physics.
Anything else to add with our Super League proposal?
I mean, other than to say that I think it probably will happen because of money, some form of some change to the Champions League will happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I love it because it scares me and it's different and I fear change, but I think it could be very interesting.
I think the thing I would like about it is it would open up... domestic leagues are definitely getting top-heavy, right? Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona. I mean, Sevilla, Atletico challenging, but Real Madrid, Barcelona, the big guys. I think it would at least suddenly make certain leagues more interesting by cutting off the big teams, sending them higher up, which is really where they are, right? They're already higher up. Make that a reality, make that league more interesting. It would also maybe restore glory to some of the smaller big-time teams, like the teams that were big in the past when Champions League money and domestic TV money didn't dominate, like your Ajax, for example, Benfica we talked about, Rangers and Celtic. It could be a real boon for them, right? All of that really could bring the good times back.
Yeah, I think so. And then, I mean, even if you like made the Europa League its own league as well, like the Sub-Champions League, SuperLeague one, then if you did something like that, I don't know how that would work, but if you pulled 2 teams into that, so then they're competing in their Europa League, you have the Super League above it, that's 5 teams that you removed from the Premier League. If you bring them back for those cup competitions, there's always that talk about how do you improve the FA Cup to make it exciting again. Well, that's how you do it. You have 5 clubs that are huge that wouldn't otherwise be as significant.
It's the only chance to see them against domestic competition that's not also in the Super League.
Exactly.
All right.
There we are.
Let's make it happen.
All right.
All right, before we answer another listener question, today's show is sponsored by SeatGeek. SeatGeek has made buying tickets online for sports and concerts less confusing than it's ever been. SeatGeek came along and created an amazing app and website that makes it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets.
That's right. They do all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites, and then you can see what's available for how much and the value of that seat, basically assigned by a color code, correct?
Yes, a grade and a color code.
Yes, there it is.
All right, Taylor. So the way we do these ads is we normally talk about, we take out a SeatGeek app, have a scroll around, get jealous about all the fun things that are happening. Is there anything that you would like to be going to that you see on SeatGeek?
Yeah, the man that I've recently discovered, thanks to our friend Scott Dottridge, was Action Bronson, who's a rapper from Queens, who sounds exactly like Ghostface Killah.
That's a great name.
He sounds exactly like Ghostface. It's really strange, but I like him a lot. He has a cooking show for Vice that I cannot say on air because we're family friendly. But he is performing at the Pot of Gold Music Festival, and a 2-day pass is available on SeatGeek. It's rather expensive, but I think that's because it is a 2-day festival. Also playing there are Death Cab for Cutie, Flogging Molly,
Love Death Cab.
A bunch of other folks.
I would go just to see Death Cab.
Well, it's going to be in Chandler, Arizona. So
that's quite
at the Pot of Gold Music Festival.
But if you are in Arizona, SeatGeek is the place to get tickets for that event.
There you go.
Which I assume is going to be sold out.
Probably.
I'm looking at this from the other angle. I have tickets to see the Avett Brothers in March at the National in Richmond. The face price was not thrilling to me, but we have the tickets, and now I'm not sure that I want to go. So SeatGeek is also the place to sell tickets. This is a recent-ish development, right? So I'm kind of considering putting my tickets on SeatGeek to sell, to do it from the other way round. I would have to talk to my wife about it, though.
Yeah, shots fired at the Avett Brothers.
Yeah, I don't know. I listened to a couple of songs, I'm like, it's okay.
It's fine. Yeah. All right. Well, so we'll see what happens if you get authorization.
Yeah, that's basically the deal. I may end up going just to sort of have a night out with my wife. Let's put it that way.
Well, you might be making money off of your ticket sales. Who knows? Or at least getting your money back. But if you want to get money for buying tickets, you can do that. To get your $20 rebate on tickets, download the SeatGeek app, go to the Settings tab, and click Add a Promo Code. Enter promo code TSS. SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first purchase.
So download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code TSS today. That way they know we sent you.
There we are. Next question comes from Guy Edwab. He says, there seems to be an exodus of U.S. women's national team talent to Europe in this window. Is this a big risk for NWSL survival? Are the CBA negotiations driving this, or bad conditions for players in NWSL versus Europe? Or is Europe ramping up investment? Lots of questions there. Let's get to it.
The answer to the final 3 questions is yes.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
The answer to the first question. So let's first, if anyone doesn't know what Guy is talking about, the big one that got everyone's attention is Alex Morgan left NWSL, left Orlando Pride, is with Lyon at least until June. Right? Crystal Dunn of the Washington Spirit has joined Chelsea Ladies, which sounds almost like Chelsea lately, but it's not. Heather O'Reilly, Heyo, has left and joined Arsenal Ladies. Right? So there have been 3 big exits from the NWSL over to Europe.
Then you also have Kim Little has left. She's gone to Arsenal.
Of course, yeah.
You have 2 young Canadian talents in the form of Khadijah Buchanan and Ashley Lawrence. Both of them have gone to play for France,
Lyon
in France
PSG,
for
right?
Lyon and PSG, respectively.
So those are players that I think just skipped NWSL altogether, right?
They skipped the draft,
and went straight to Europe.
Right.
Having a gap year kind of thing, right?
Sure.
So should we answer Guy's first question first?
Sure.
Is this a big risk for the NWSL's survival?
No, I don't think it is.
I'm not sure it is either. It's a bad story, but it's not necessarily an actual risk.
No, because it seems like, from everything that I've read, it seems like the NWSL has survived longer than either of the previous 2 women's league formats, basically.
Yeah, but I think we're only in the 5th season, right? So it's not as if just surpassing those marks means that all is good, right? But it is a success so far,
And I think
in those terms.
Yeah, and I think you're correct that like the answer to all of his next 3 questions are yes, so it's a lot of different combinations there.
And we'll talk about those in a second.
Right, but I bring that up only to say that because I think the NWSL has bigger issues that it needs to deal with. It needs to deal with how do you drive attendance, how do you get more teams in, how do you ensure that those teams are working successfully. And
how do you pay those players more without losing money?
Exactly. I mean, so you've got a lot of issues that need to be kind of dealt with like from a league standpoint, that it's not necessarily about the individual players that you might be losing. I mean, leagues are going to lose players. That's kind of part and parcel of what happens.
But that's why public perception, though, Morgan leaving, albeit temporarily, Dunn leaving, up-and-coming US women's national team player. She's basically an established USWNT player right now. Heather O'Reilly leaving, Kim Little leaving.
There's another big one that you're forgetting.
Who's that then?
Hope Solo is gone because of the U.S.
She's not gone to Europe, right? She's just
no, she's gone. But when she comes back, she won't be in the U.S. national team player pool likely, which means that she's not going to be having her salary paid by U.S. Soccer, which means she'll then be subject to salary cap restrictions, which means she probably won't want to play in the NWSL.
Well, yeah. Should we address Guy's second block of questions then? Are the CBA negotiations driving this? I think the answer is yes, slightly, in that the whole thing is all linked in this weird way. If people don't know about this, US Soccer Federation, as well as I think the Canadian Federation and I think the Mexican Federation, pay the salaries of like centrally contracted national team players who are in the NWSL so that, for example, when Alex Morgan is in NWSL playing for Orlando Pride, Orlando Pride don't pay her salary. US Soccer pays her like national team salary and also pays her a salary to play in NWSL.
Right. I think the cap there it's a minimum of if you're a
it's
US
74.
I think it's 60, but it might be higher than that. I've seen 60 and then up to 110 is basically what they'll pay for.
But essentially, like US Soccer are paying Alex Morgan's salary, NWSL are not sort of liable to it. But the bargaining agreement expired December 31st. They seem to be no closer to renegotiating anything new. So essentially, it's all up in the air right now. No one really knows exactly what's going to happen. And even when they do finally work it out, US Soccer still has to select the 2017 contracted players, right? We don't know who they're going to be right now.
Right, because that's part of the issue, right, is that there are, clauses in there limiting the pay of non-internationals, and then there are restrictions on the player pool, because there's lots of players who could get one cap for the U.S. women's national team. That doesn't mean that they're then in that pool that U.S. Soccer has to pay their salary.
I think it makes it harder to select players who aren't like identified.
I think it does. I think because there's restrictions on who can be called up that you run into issues there. So, or maybe there's not restrictions on who can be called up, but in terms of then how does that affect salary and salary cap, that's a problem. And
Speaking of salary cap.
But basically because there's no agreement in place, NWSL can't kind of change the salary cap rules, can't really look at that.
And can't promise anyone anything right
until
now,
everything else gets sorted. Yeah.
And even so, 2016, the situation was every team in NWSL had a salary cap of $278,000. Right? For 20 players. Right? Some of those players can be US national team players, Mexican players, Canadian players. So they're sort of not covered. So maybe really you're talking about less than 20 players. But the maximum salary for a player who is actually paid by the NWSL team, not by the National Federation, was $39,700. So that's how much your maximum you can earn. You can maybe do some coaching, you can maybe do a bit of this, bit of that on the side, but you're not making a huge sort of professional athlete salary, even if your skills demand it. So I think that's another huge problem as well.
I mean, and a lot of these teams, like Washington Spirit, for example, Washington is not cheap. Like, it is not a cheap place to live. 39 is not going to get the job done. So you're going to have to take other jobs, or what tends to happen is you reach a point where it's sort of like you're in the prime of your career, but it's just not a cost-effective career option anymore. And so you have people leaving the league to take other, professional non-soccer jobs because they're going to get more money to do so.
So let's address Guy's second point. Is it bad conditions for players in the NWSL versus Europe? And so that salary stuff kind of comes into it, right? Because if you do go to play for Lyon or PSG, there's money at those teams to pay you more, right? Yeah, so Europe in general, you can't be guaranteed that you'll make more money, but there are sort of kind of super clubs. Mostly they're connected to much bigger men's teams, and therefore there is more disposable income available for players. There's more income available for players. Like Megan Rapinoe earned a lot of money when she played over France.
So there's a great article about this in The Guardian, and the biggest thing about it was that in the comments section there's a very long, detailed explanation of the differences between European leagues and the NWSL.
Right.
And a big part of it is that in those European leagues, the individual clubs are negotiating sponsorships. So a lot of times, these big clubs, they're not getting a huge number of people attending the Women's League games.
Right.
They're making their money off of sponsorships that are connected to the parent club, or that they know that there are companies that will want to advertise and they're making their money that way. It's not necessarily ticket revenue the way it is for a lot of other teams.
Well, but if you're PSG or Lyon, you have brand recognition, right? In a way that, for example, Boston Breakers don't, right? Because it's a long-established brand, PSG and Lyon,
right?
Or Arsenal Ladies or anything like that. It has that ring of the famous team about it.
It does. And so with those teams, you have more money to spend. You're going to get the higher caliber of player. From what I understand, from what I've read, NWSL as a whole is a higher standard of play than, say, the French league. Now, those
top
two...
to bottom.
Yes, because those two big teams, Lyon and PSG, are going to come in and they could maybe win NWSL. I don't know. They would definitely be very competitive. But those lower teams in the league, less so.
Right.
And so I think if you're playing in the NWSL, it's more consistent competition from top to bottom.
Yeah.
But if you're playing for those bigger teams in Europe, it's more money. You're winning titles there. You're in the Champions League. So it's a more attractive destination for that top-tier player, at least right now.
Another thing I read, and this gets to maybe the reasons for Alex Morgan's move, another thing I read was that essentially the NWSL is known as a more physical league where things like strength and speed are more important to winning, whereas Europe in general is known as being a more technical place, France especially. There's a great explanation that I saw about Alex Morgan. In her own words, she basically said, yeah, I'm sort of relied on, all the teams I play on, I'm relied on for my speed to get in behind defences and finish first time or take a touch and finish. I want to improve my game. I want to move to a league where they play a little slower, where maybe I have to play back to goal and I have to come deeper and connect play. She's making the argument that she's going to go to Europe, come back a better player because she'll be used in a different way. She'll learn different skills, and that will ultimately benefit the US women's national team when there isn't space in behind, like maybe when you play Sweden in the Olympics. They don't give you space in behind. You have to build a little differently. You can learn new skills that way. I mean, I'm sure that's just Alex Morgan sort of, defending her own choices. Yeah. But it does kind of make sense that it's a different place for reasons other than money.
That does make sense. And then the other thing that I've seen, now this is more, I don't know if this is conspiracy theory or openly known secret or what, or maybe just not true. But a thing that I've seen was that when the NWSL started, it was kind of made known, according to this theory that I've seen, that national team players had to return to the NWSL. That was basically, we're going to be paying your salaries. If you want to be considered for the national team, if you want to go to the Olympics or the World Cup, you're playing in the domestic league.
Right.
And there's an element of, well, there's no real contract anymore. There's no real guarantee that you're going to get paid. There's no real guarantee that U.S. Soccer is taking your concerns into consideration. So then why would you continue to play in the league when you have more money on offer at a bigger club in Europe?
And there's not a World Cup or Olympics upcoming. That's the big thing, right? There's not a thing that you have to be here for immediately.
Exactly.
You can still come back later if you need to.
Yeah, and that's why I think you see, I don't think Heather O'Reilly is coming back mid-season.
She's retired from international football anyway.
Right, but I don't think she's coming back to play for an NWSL team briefly. Right. Crystal Dunn definitely is not. She stated that openly. Yep. But Alex Morgan, as we said, might be coming back in June. I think Kim Little might. I don't know the story there completely. So you do still have some connections there. It's not as though Alex Morgan has abandoned the NWSL forever.
No, she's back in June.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So if and when the time comes when U.S. Soccer said they reach an agreement and now the Olympics are coming up, the World Cup is coming up, Alex Morgan is still going to be involved with NWSL, so she will be in consideration from that point.
2019 World Cup.
There we are.
That's the next big tournament.
Right.
So the other thing is, all of these players, Heather O'Reilly, Alex Morgan, Crystal Dunn, let's take those three because they were, one was and two are US women's national team players. To my mind, they've all left for different reasons, right? The Crystal Dunn situation, I think, is interesting. From what I understand, and this isn't that someone told me, these are reports I've read, it's a lot to do with the disagreement between Washington Spirit players and the Washington Spirit owner when he played the national anthem early so that Megan Rapinoe wasn't on the field when it happened. And a lot of those players know Megan Rapinoe and were kind of annoyed, and it started a whole argument. That's why Ali Krieger, Washington Spirit, through and through, traded to Orlando, right? Crystal Dunn, Washington Spirit, maybe their most dangerous attacker. She's gone to Chelsea Ladies. I think those things might be related.
Christine Nairn, I think it is. Forgive me, I forget her first name. She's currently in Australia because it's the off-season NWSL. They're playing, so she's there. But she has also been traded, I believe. And I think maybe she demanded that trade because she was very frustrated with ownership. So
there you go. Those are so there are different reasons why people are leaving. It's not suddenly the NWSL is collapsing and everybody's fleeing the ship. Everyone has their own reasons. I honestly think Heather O'Reilly just wanted to go live in London, which is fine, right? And go play for Arsenal Ladies. It's kind of an awesome way to get towards the end of your career and do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So NWSL is not in trouble, as we understand it. These moves do not mean anything, but they're not any sort of harbinger of doom for the NWSL. What is important, though, is that the US Soccer, the CBA, gets agreed pretty soon, right? In a way that doesn't sink the NWSL.
Which I don't think is going to happen. I'll say that as well.
That's the more scary thing, right? That if something isn't reached and then it seems to me NWSL can't afford to pay the salaries of US women's national team players, right? If Carly Lloyd suddenly had to be paid the salary she deserves by Houston Dash would have to do some fundraising pretty fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think you're going to run into issues there. You're going to run, and I think there's just so much bad blood at this point. There's so much kind of tangled webs all over the place when it comes to the salary negotiations and the contract negotiations that I think it's going to stretch on for some time, which is a shame because some of the articles I read in researching this were like in like July or August of 2016 being like, but it will definitely be resolved before the end of the year. It's like, not so much.
January 24th, 2017.
Yep.
All right, lots of TSS Scouting Network updates to come. But first, Taylor, we have a second sponsor today. I'm really excited to hear about this. It's Blue Apron. Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the country. Their mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. So since I was in Florida, I had my Blue Apron delivery delayed by a week. Mine's come in this Friday. I'm excited. In the meantime, yours has arrived, and I want to hear what happened.
All right. So ours arrived. We had the 3 different options. We went with Peeble-style pork, which was very good, I have to say. And I say we in the sense that I was recording and writing the Goalmouth episode last night. My wife tends to eat early, but this time she had not eaten dinner yet. So she decided she was going to make something. We had Blue Apron, so she made the meal.
Okay.
It was excellent. She was able to do it fairly quickly. And the coolest thing that I found was, as we talked about...
20 to 25 minutes, I've heard, is how long
with
it
prep
takes.
time. Don't forget about prep time.
Okay.
So you got to add in like 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
There. But it was interesting because, as you pointed out, like it's stuff that we wouldn't otherwise be cooking. We tend to kind of cook... What I do is usually I cook the thing that I know how to make the fastest because I don't have that much time. I'll make pasta and veggies or something like that really quickly.
Because you're always in a rush, right?
Yeah,
You've always got to be somewhere else.
Basically. So this allows you to sort of follow the instructions, make something you wouldn't otherwise make. The thing that she enjoyed...
Outsource your food thinking.
Yeah.
Right?
But the thing that she enjoyed the most was, #1, that you have photos along with the instructions so you kind of can see what it's supposed to look like. And they give you little tips here and there that she wouldn't otherwise have known, that I wouldn't have known.
Like what? Do you have an example for me? Please have an example.
I do.
Yeah?
Because we don't have a backsplash right now behind our stove. So if you're cooking meat on a stove, it's going to pop up and you're going to get stains behind you. And their point was cover it with aluminum foil. Wouldn't have done that. Wouldn't have known to do that. But that's how she cooked the pork, was cover it with aluminum foil. It worked really well. And it was perfectly cooked pork, which is difficult to do because pork is tough. It keeps cooking. So you got to know exactly when to turn it off, and they got it right.
All right. Top work, Margaret. Top work, Blue Apron. I'll tell you all about mine when I get my vegetarian version on Friday.
All right.
If listeners would like to take us up on this offer, you can check out this week's menu and get 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/TSS. Stands for Total Soccer Show. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait.
That's blueapron.com/TSS. Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
Final segment on today's show, Mr. Rockwell, is a bumper Total Soccer Show Scouting Network featuring more than one young American. We got one report that's actually not included on the list here, but the news came in roughly this early morning, late this afternoon, right? Late morning, early afternoon is what I meant. Gedion Zelalem has left Arsenal on loan to play for Venlo.
Sure.
Why?
No, yes. I mean, he has, but I'll take your word for it because I don't. There's like a bunch of V's in that name, so I don't know. I think they're VVV Venlo.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Venlo are in the Eredivisie second division.
For those of you who haven't read the story about Zelalem going, then you should probably tell people where Venlo are. Yeah, in terms of the table. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the second division of the Netherlands.
Can you tell that I'm not excited about this move? Is that coming across?
So I kind of was to begin with. I thought, okay, second-tier Dutch team. It's going to be a decent quality of soccer. He's going to get to play some nice passing football. Then I saw Leander Schalaken's tweet, which was essentially, that's a low standard of football. What's he doing there?
And it was like, and it was very, it hit it home because as I recall, it was we don't have the tweet in front of us, but it was something like, it's not a very good standard of football, period, at all. Like it was very like this is not good. And
well, it's an upgrade to not playing for Arsenal, right? To never getting minutes for Arsenal versus playing in the second division in the Netherlands. Yeah. That's an upgrade.
Matches are matches.
Matches are matches.
That is definitely true.
Yeah.
That said, for a guy who Jurgen Klinsmann once said could come in and impact the U.S. national team at 18, for a guy who maybe people thought was going to go to Borussia Dortmund, not this guy, but some people. Borussia Mönchengladbach, rumored as well, had played for Celtic or for Rangers, not Celtic, last season. I think it's not the best move. I mean, in terms of he's going to get playing time, sure, but it maybe is a reality check for people like myself who thought he was at a different level than maybe he is.
I will say at least this makes him a sort of promotion specialist because he went to Rangers last season. They got promoted. They were top, I think, when he went there. Yeah. He's gone to Venlo. They're top.
Let's hope they stay there.
Possibly going to get promoted. He's going to have lots of second division medals.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if did he get one for Rangers? Because didn't he stop playing? Wasn't he injured for a while there?
He will have played enough.
Okay,
definitely.
let's hope so.
He said confidently.
But so I think overall it's slightly disappointing. I think given the clubs that he was linked with, even if those moves seemed unlikely at the time, it's still you would have expected him to get at least like a first division, an Eredivisie team than a second division team.
Well, maybe next season. I mean, what if they get promoted, then they sign him on another season-long loan in the actual Eredivisie top flight, right?
Sure. What if?
Sure.
What if?
Try and get excited. I'll tell you what we'll do. Obviously, this is not televised over here because it's the second division. I'm assuming we'll see highlights on Reddit, on Twitter, here. And if Vine still existed, highlights would be on there.
Yep.
So we'll try and track down, see what we can catch of young Mr. Zelalem, at least playing some soccer.
Sure.
All right, should we get to today's Scouting Network?
That works for me.
Taylor, what you got for me?
All right, up first is a report from Kevin Foy, scouting Jonathan Lewis, the 19-year-old forward for NYCFC, as of a couple days ago. NYCFC didn't have any first-round picks, but that didn't stop them from sending $250,000 in general allocation money to the Chicago Fire for their third overall pick, which New York then used to draft Jonathan Lewis as a Generation Adidas contract player. He was one of 3 MLS Superdraft picks, along with Atlanta's Miles Robinson and Portland's Jeremy Ebobisse, that will join Tab Ramos' squad as it prepares for February's CONCACAF U20 Championship in Costa Rica. So he's basically going to be all over the place this season because he's going to be with the U20s, then he's going to be in preseason, then he's going to be playing MLS, then if they make it, then he's going back with the U20s in the middle of the season. It's going to be chaotic, but Jonathan Lewis, I believe, is pretty excited.
I've noticed this thinking about US youth national team players that are with MLS. They tend to get released to those U20 and U17 teams. They have more chance of being released than, say, a European team, right? If you're with a European team. Right. But it really affects your season, right? Because, you're here, you're there. You never seem to, settle into exactly where you are.
Yeah, and it requires rotation, so then you have to have a number of players to fill that one spot in case you're gone, or risk, just having somebody deputized briefly and hope that it works out.
Yeah, and it means Patrick Vieira can't be like, all right, I'm going to rely on this kid. I'm going to bring him in the last few minutes here and there. Then suddenly he's gone playing for the U20s.
That said, from Kevin's report, it was New York apparently called him the day before the draft, and they had an interview, and he was like, that was weird that this team with no draft picks chose to have an interview with me, and then they made these moves really quickly. So it seems like he impressed, whatever that means.
It's weird that you can impress in an interview to play soccer.
Yeah.
It's not like a normal job application.
I guess you can answer the right questions and say the right things.
You'd be like, what, you're in front of goal, do you A, stick it in the corner, or B, send it into the stands? And he's like, A, score a goal.
Do you consider yourself more of a Red Bull or more of a person wearing light blue? Tell me what you think.
What's your biggest weakness?
I love the Michael Scott. It's like I work too hard, I stay at the office too long, and I care too much.
That really is a hard question to answer.
Well, then why don't you tell me about your strengths? My weaknesses are my strengths.
All right, next up, we have a report from Ryan Marzak, scouting Pione Sisto, the 21-year-old winger for Celta Vigo. Ryan says, after playing only 3 minutes in the last 2 games, Pione started and went the full 90 against Real Sociedad. They lost that game 1-0, but he had the highest match rating of any Celta player. This week, they have a crucial home second leg quarter-final matchup against...
There's a lot of things in there, yeah.
...against Real Madrid. Celta holds a 2-1 advantage there, and Ryan hopes that Sisto gets a chance to finish them off.
Go on, Pione. Go on.
I'm not taking sides.
Next
report. Because there are scouts who's playing for Real Madrid as well, right?
This is very true.
Yeah.
Enzo Zidane comes to mind. Next report comes from Rylan Arnold, scouting Ben Woodburn, the 17-year-old forward/winger for Liverpool.
Ooh, exciting. Yeah.
Woodburn has been making the bench for Liverpool's recent Premier League matches and has been getting actual game time in the domestic cup competitions. He started in the recent FA Cup match against Plymouth Argyle, but looked tentative at times, and I think that's been kind of consistent for him when playing for the senior team. That said, Liverpool are unlikely to strengthen in January, meaning that Woodburn will likely continue to get first-team minutes here and there, maybe even get a Premier League appearance at some point.
Do you know who Liverpool are playing in the next round of the FA Cup?
I do, because I talked to my buddy Trey about it. Trey's a Liverpool fan, and he wished you the best/worst of luck. I think it was the best of luck for the season outside of that one game.
I'm going to hope that Liverpool do play Ben Woodburn against Wolves, because that will mean they've picked a weakened team.
Well, we'll see.
All right, next up, Carolyn is scouting Kellyn Acosta, the 21-year-old midfielder / defender. I'm going to say midfielder for FC Dallas. Carolyn says Acosta left the US national team January camp early due to a mild left ankle sprain. Matt Hedges injured and Kekuta Mane, Vancouver's preseason tour in Wales, also departed the camp, meaning that the roster now stands at 28 players. Acosta's departure is disappointing to those of us who wanted to see how he performed for the national team as a midfielder, which is his club position, but not his national team position under Jurgen Klinsmann.
Indeed.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, we wanted to see him, and now we can't. And now I
want to see him partnered with Michael Bradley.
But I hope Kekuta Mane enjoys Wales.
Yeah, me too. Why not?
There's that. Next up, Nathan Grimm is scouting Aaron Kovar, the 23-year-old midfielder for Seattle.
Okay. I haven't read this yet, but does someone say nice things about him?
What do you mean?
In this report, will someone be saying nice things about Aaron Kovar?
I think so, but I think I didn't include that part. What I did include was that 2016 was a good year for Kovar, but it was cut short due to a collarbone injury. Prior to that time, he had 10 starts and notched his first ever goal for the Sounders. During the offseason, he trained with Hibernian in Scotland, Preston North End in England, both of which, Nathan emphasizes, were training stints and not trials. Kovar is now back with Seattle for preseason and could have a big year given that he, according to Nathan, is now Seattle's best wide attacking left-footed player. That's because Ivanchitz has gone. He's gone back to, I think, Victoria Pilsen is where he's departed for. And so then you still have Jordan Morris who could play wide. Clint Dempsey could. Nico Ladero could. But they obviously prefer to play through the middle.
And he's left-footed.
There's that too.
So the guy who said nice things about him, Achilles Gomez.
Yes.
He's obviously just left Seattle to become an ESPN commentator, right? He'll be appearing on TV. But he's been a bit more, in a good way, like talkative since he left, giving opinions on various players. And he essentially, from my memory, I quickly looked, I couldn't find the actual quote. I just know that it was Gomez said something like he can hang with anyone, essentially. So maybe big times for Aaron Kovar in 2017.
Yes, big times for Aaron Kovar, and hopefully big times for Clint Dempsey. Seattle reported for preseason training. I believe today they had their first training session. Yeah. Clint Dempsey was there training. I don't know if it was full training. I don't know if it was getting into it. I imagine the first day of training it's not high intensity, at least when it comes to physical contact. Yeah. But he was there, as was, I think, Steve Zakuani was in training gear, supposedly.
Awesome.
Interesting.
Right.
Interesting times.
Up next, Brett Walker scouting Tom Davies, the 18-year-old midfielder for Everton. Interesting times for Tom Davies, at least last week. Brett says, another gift-tastic email. Taylor says, another gift-tastic email from Brett. Yeah. Or GIF-tastic, whichever you prefer.
GIF. It's GIF.
Thomashavitz says GIF. The guy who invented it says GIF, right? That's where the argument comes from.
Don't care. It's graphic.
Don't care. Davies got another start for Everton against Crystal Palace. He made a few mistakes, but provided the assist for Seamus Coleman's goal in their 1-0 win. I didn't know this. Everton have now scored 13 goals and conceded none in the 453 minutes that Davies has been on the pitch. I'm not saying it can't be all him. Right? This has led some to wonder what will happen when Idrissa Gueye returns from the Africa Cup of Nations. He has been their most consistent player, but now there's Davies, Morgan Schneiderlin and James McCarthy to contend with. Ronald Koeman will have some tough decisions to make. Those are happy headaches if you're Ronald Koeman.
Yeah, I think so. Up next and final report comes from Richie Garcia scouting Emerson Hyndman, the 20-year-old midfielder for Rangers on loan from Bournemouth. Emerson Hyndman made his debut at Ibrox for Rangers in the 72nd minute, and Motherwell scored 2 minutes later. It didn't look good for Rangers, but they scored 2 in the last 10 minutes, with Emerson capitalizing on a mistake by Motherwell to feed a nice through ball to Kenny Miller and assist on the game-winning goal.
Kenny Miller, ex-Wolves. We looked at this assist. We got a good look at this Emerson Hyndman assist. It's a really nice ball, right? It's kind of an obvious pass because Kenny Miller is running directly at goal between two centre-backs who've left a gigantic gap for Kenny Miller to be in, right? But Emerson Hyndman's ball is perfectly weighted, right? It's played just to the side of Kenny Miller, just ahead of him, enough that it goes through quickly and then kind of holds up a little bit. Perfect for Miller to run onto and bury.
I mean, because it would be easy for that ball to bobble, to bounce, to overhit it. It's a perfect ball.
From memory, Kenny Miller doesn't have to break stride. I think
I believe he does not. Yeah, I think he takes a touch and finishes, and it's a good finish to the far side netting. Yeah, gotta love it.
So you kind of laughed at me when I did an episode of Goalmouth when this move Hyndman to Rangers was announced, and I said the future of the US men's national team midfield is moving to Scotland because you weren't fully convinced about Hyndman's abilities.
No, I think he's a very good player. I'm not convinced that he is the future of the US national team.
I do. I really think he's the future sort of linchpin of the US national team midfield.
See,
I'm taking this pass as evidence.
Here's what you're doing. Here's the Daryl Grove trickery. You did not say at the time, He is the future of the U.S. men's national team midfield, or the linchpin of the future U.S. men's... You said the future of the national team.
I still stand by that. I still stand by that.
And Christian Pulisic would like a word with you, is what I have to say to that.
He'll get to play as well. He'll be running onto Hyndman's through balls.
And Gedion Zelalem is somewhere in the background.
Possibly.
Me too, guys.
Yeah,
me too.
He'll be still on loan somewhere in the nether reaches of Netherlands.
I do want to say
apologies to any Venlo fans.
True. I did want to say before we get out of scouting, I knew there was something I wanted to bring up when we were discussing Tom Davies and Everton. Mm-hmm. It was the opponent that they beat, which was Crystal Palace. I made a joke about this on Twitter. I don't know what's happened to Crystal Palace.
Oh, because you said that Allardyce would start picking up points immediately, right?
Pretty much, I said within the first 3 matches, he got 1 point in the first 3. It's not looking good. I believe they're in the relegation
You need more
now.
than one for points to be...
It seems that way, yeah. Between him and... I guess Swansea did get the result at the weekend, so that's looking better. But Palace, still struggling, and I did not see that coming. So I was wrong on that one. I will fully admit that.
I wish Big Sam was still England manager, but there you go. So, if you would like to join...
Give Gareth a chance,
If you would like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, you can go to totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. If you join at the $5 a month level or higher, you get a scout, a TSS scout. If you're waiting for your scout, email us, let us know, say itchy feet in the subject line. We'll send you your scout as soon as we can. If you subscribe at $10 a month or higher, we guarantee to answer one question a month on the show. TotalSoccerShow.com/subscribe.
There we are.
All right, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I'm just mixing it up.
Did you forget my name for a second there?
No, I'm mixing up the phrasing like Sinatra did.
All right, fair enough. Well, right back at you, Darrell.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We will talk to you again tomorrow.